The message going around, a lot of people right now on the internet, and especially Kentuckians, are kind of equating the Black Lives Matter protests with the insurrection that happened at the Capitol. So many people just want to compare them and say, that they're the same, and wanting to justify the violence that happened on both sides. And so I would like to ask you to please clear the air on some of that. Could you please speak to maybe the messages or the lies that are being spread about Black Lives Matter being a militant group that is specifically about creating violence, that they've burned cities to the ground? I know I've visited Louisville several times, and it still seems to be perfectly intact, and everything is fine there. And I'd also like for you to explain, so the night that you were recently arrested at a vigil that was for Breonna Taylor, did you think that group was being violent, or that it warranted your arrest and the arrest of many other people? And could you compare that or contrast it to the situation at the Capitol, and really tell people, are these situations similar, or are they very much different?
I appreciate that question, because one of the things I've said for years about the Democratic Party is that it has to have a backbone. Right now, I'm just be real honest with y'all, the Democratic Party does not have a backbone, and I'm a Democrat. For far too long, we've allowed Republicans to shape the narrative about who we are, but we don't talk about the violent Republicans. We don't talk about the extremist Republicans. We don't talk about the radical Republicans. We just kind of let them go and call us whatever it is they choose to call us, and we don't often speak up for ourselves and fight back. In fact, our state Democratic Party was quite silent throughout the year of 2020 as it relates to the movement for Black lives, didn't say much of anything about the movement for justice for Breonna Taylor, and that was a failure on their part. So when they come back in 2022, running their candidates for office, they're going to go directly to the same Black folks who were putting their lives on the line and expect us to show up and win them some seats. So, we got folks who are not interested in that, not going to play those games. So I understand completely, and I've said myself that what we saw happen to the violent insurrectionists in DC was very different from what we saw with folks involved with the movement for Black lives. I mean, we literally had Capitol Police just nicely asking people if they would please remove themselves from the Senate chamber. Well, when you feel better, when you get, when you feel like you're up to it, please move. We had police who were involved with the violence. We had Congress people like Clyburn, who said his office is unmarked. And so for them to have found his office means that Capitol Police led them there. We had Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley talk about the fact that her panic buttons were ripped out before the insurrection. That means that Capitol Police were involved in the violence. And yet you see us, the Movement for Black Lives, marching, singing, chanting, kids leading protest marches with megaphones, holding signs, laying on the ground, hands up, and yet we're called the ones who are violent. The second night of protests in Louisville, my 19-year-old daughter and I were tear gassed by police, and we were simply standing in front of them. Yes, there were some white folks who were throwing water bottles at police. They were empty plastic water bottles, and those police officers had riot gear and shields. And your shield got hit with the empty plastic water bottle, and you decided that you were going to attack us with tear gas. My daughter, should she ever decide to have a child, her reproductive system could be harmed irreparably because of that chemical weapon of warfare. And then we were arrested and lied on by police. Said that we tried to firebomb the downtown library that's in the district that I represent, a library that I do nothing but support. And so we were lied on. I had emails afterwards from people saying we should burn your house down the way that you tried to burn down the library. So when you hear me speak with the conviction that I have, it's because I've been through what so many of my colleagues will never have to go through, because they don't live the same life that I live. And so I don't have time to hold people's hands and make them feel good about themselves, regardless of their political party, when I've been on the front lines with my community for more than 200 days, and so many of those very same people have been silent. I will say that I'm very grateful to the folks who have shown up with us. And because of them showing up, they were able to see for themselves the way that police were violent. They were able to see for themselves us being assaulted with long range acoustic devices, to try to, blow out our eardrums. So that's what we experienced for going on 10 months now and fighting for justice for Breonna Taylor. And we had law enforcement from the alphabet soup, from federal to state to local. And so when I hear law enforcement in DC say that they were not prepared or that they were overwhelmed, I don't want to hear it. We pay you to be prepared. We pay you and train you not to be overwhelmed. But yet, when Daniel Cameron was going to come out with his announcement that there would be no justice for Breonna Taylor, 3 days before that announcement, the mayor and the governor colluded together to bring every kind of law enforcement to Louisville. For what? For what? There was no violence from the people. There was only violence from law enforcement. That is it. Over 700 people have been arrested in Louisville fighting for justice for Breonna Taylor.